Hello, YouTube and Game of Thrones fans. This is the Six Sigma, and this is a look ahead, a recap and analysis of the recently aired Game of Thrones episodes. So, since I was on vacation this past week, I was unable to complete an analysis of Episode 2. As a result, I will be speaking about a couple important points about Episode 2, and then transition into the analysis of Episode 3. Once again, we are examining some of the key phrases and actions from the most recent episode and trying to determine what they might be foreshadowing and how they play a role into the ending of the show. So, let's begin. So, first, I want to touch on a couple topics from episode 2 before I talk about episode 3. There were a couple scenes that were worth noting from episode 2, and it begins with Daenerys' meeting with Melisandre. So, right off the bat, Daenerys seems to welcome in Melisandre with open arms, since the Red Priests helped her cause in Essos. After a little conversation, Mel is able to convince Daenerys to seek the help of Jon Snow, and Tyrion immediately takes to this idea and advises Daenerys to meet with him. The next scene cuts to Jon reading a Raven scroll summoning him to Dragonstone. Now there were some key topics touched on here. Melisandre talks about the prince that was promised, and Daenerys seems to be thrown off since she is not a prince, but Missandei immediately comments to Daenerys that the word for prince is gender neutral, so it could also be princess. Now, for those that believe in the theory that Daenerys is the prince that was promised, this was a major scene for her. Could the show be hinting at Daenerys being the warrior to fight off the darkness? Personally, I still think it's Jon, but as Melisandre mentions to her, she has a part to play as well. The other important part from this scene was Tyrion's interest in Jon. Now, we remember from season 1 that Tyrion was quite fond of Jon and accompanies him to the wall. He even helps Jon during his rough start with the Night's Watch. Now they are fighting on opposite sides, but Tyrion sees Jon as a strong potential ally. But the importance here is more related to the end of the show. If Tyrion is a secret Targaryen, as I pointed out in my past videos, then their impending meetup is extremely important. Now in episode 3 we see them unite, but I'll actually talk about that later on in this video. Another important scene from the second episode was the revelation of Cersei's dragon weapon. Qyburn mentioned that one of Daenerys' dragons was hurt in Meereen, so he ordered the construction of a giant crossbow. Now this is likely going to be important during the impending battle between Cersei and Daenerys. I would be shocked if one of the dragons were killed by the crossbow, but the groundwork is there for a scene with some soldiers trying to take out one of the dragons. Maybe it leads to one of them being captured by Cersei. We're just going to have to wait and see how this develops. There were a couple other important scenes from episode 2, but none that left us with unanswered questions in episode 3 or that seemed to have seriously major implications. Sam performed the procedure to cure Ser Jorah of his grayscale, and in episode 3 we find out that it worked. The question now is, will Jorah make it back to Daenerys, and how will that go? It seems as if that is his likely next move. Also in this episode, Arya finds out about Jon in the North via Hot Pie, which changes her storyline too. Rather than setting her eyes on Cersei, she now seems to be heading towards Winterfell. Now this might suspend her ambitions to kill Cersei for now, but I'd be willing to say that she still has intentions to kill her when the time is right. Also, Euron captured Yara and killed some of the Sand Snakes while Theon jumped into the water to escape. Did he return to Reek, or did he have a different plan up his sleeve? And where will he go next? I would imagine that if he returns to Daenerys, it's going to look bad that he shows up while his sister is being held captive by Cersei and Euron. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. And lastly, we have Jon Snow's remaining scenes from episode 2. A couple major things happened for Jon in episode 2. He is summoned by Tyrion to come meet Daenerys. One line that fascinated me was the line that Tyrion wrote regarding all dwarves being bastards in their father's eyes. This line seemed to be randomly placed, which made me question if this was a secret reference to the theory that Tyrion is the Mad King's bastard son. Coincidentally, it was actually the closing clip that I used in the video I made before Season 6 regarding Tyrion possibly being a secret Targaryen. If Tyrion does end up being a secret Targaryen, the writers did a good job of leaving the most subtle of clues. The other thing that will have major implications this season was Jon deciding to meet with Daenerys. Before he leaves, he decides that he will put Sansa in charge of Winterfell, which might have some serious repercussions this season. We already see she is power hungry. Will this add a flame to the fire? Furthermore, we have the actual implications of Jon meeting Daenerys. The last two known Targaryens are finally coming together in the show, which will likely have implications for this season and the next. And in episode 3 we finally see them meet up, which brings me to the analysis of the third episode. So the start of the third episode was heavily centered around the meeting between Daenerys and Jon Snow. Now honestly, this scene was highly anticipated. I mean, fans have been waiting for this for years, literally years, and it wasn't a disappointment. Now the scene really had interesting dynamics. Daenerys continuously tries to get Jon to pledge allegiance to her cause, and Jon refuses on the notion that if he does, then his effort to fight against the White Walkers would be squandered. For Jon, it was more about making Daenerys aware of the White Walker threat. He even touches on it later when he talks to Tyrion on the cliffside. Will he be able to convince her, and how? That will likely be the real question moving forward. Furthermore, the other emphasized point was Jon's reaction when Sir Davos told Daenerys that he took a knife in the heart for his people. Why is Jon keeping that fact a secret? Now, the more likely answer is that Jon doesn't want Daenerys to think that he or Sir Davos are crazy, but in regards to storytelling, this likely means that there will be some sort of dramatic reveal down the line. She even questioned his words later in the episode, so it will be definitely something that the show returns to, and there will be some significance to the scene when she finds out. The question is when and how will Daenerys respond? Another interesting scene from this episode occurred between Lord Varys and Melisandre. Lord Varys wonders why Mel is so distant from Jon Snow, despite being a major advocate for him. She tells him that she has made a huge mistake and that her presence is likely unwelcome for Sir Davos and for Jon Snow. She does mention, though, that she played her part by bringing ice and fire together, and that now she will likely return to Volantis. Lord Varys tells her that maybe it's better if she doesn't return, and then she ominously tells him that both of them must die in this foreign country. Now, the fire and ice line was perfectly placed since the book series is called A Song of Ice and Fire. Her line is possibly hinting at the fact that Jon and Daenerys' alliance is one of the major plot points of the entire show, and the entire book series for that matter. Moreover, her line about both of them dying in Westeros is something to note as well. Does she know something about their fates? And does Varys know too? He seems to be disturbed by the comments as well. Maybe his story about the sorcerer and the voice coming from the fire has something to do with it. I'd be willing to say that it's likely that this topic will be revisited sometime in the coming episodes. Moving forward, Euron proves himself to be a valuable asset to Cersei by delivering Yara, Ellaria Sand, and her daughter to Cersei. He wants her to promise him her hand in marriage, but she states not until the war is won. Cersei is clearly using Euron as she isn't interested in his advances, but the more she becomes dependent on his fleet, the more leverage he will have against her to demand things. Not to mention, it seems that Euron is upsetting Jaime more and more every time they meet. What is this doing to Jaime's character and what does it mean? It already seems as if Jaime is becoming slightly distant to Cersei. Their relationship already seems primarily sexual in its nature, and it could be a sign that Jaime will eventually turn his back on Cersei. Could this be indicating her betrayal too? It seems to be playing into the theory that Jaime will be the one to kill Cersei. Then we return to Jon and Daenerys' storyline for a moment as Daenerys seems to have lightened up to Jon. After consulting with Tyrion, she decides to let him mine the dragonglass needed to fight the White Walkers. He still refuses to bend the knee, but her act of good faith has eased the tension between their sides. This scene likely represents the start of an alliance, and it should be important moving forward. Now that she has given Jon help, will he find a way to help her, and how will their storyline develop as the season goes on? The show then cuts back to Winterfell and we see Baelish trying to butter up Sansa. Now that she has some power in Winterfell, it's probably safe to assume that Baelish is thinking of ways to assume that power. We might have to wait a few episodes to see what he is planning, but there is no doubt he is up to no good. However, he seems to be finding it more difficult now that Sansa is wise to his tricks. Also during this scene, we see the reunion between Bran and Sansa as he finally makes it to Winterfell. As they speak by the weirwood tree, Bran tries to give Sansa a little insight into his abilities. He tells her that he can see everything that has ever happened and everything that is happening right now. Now I've mentioned this before, but Bran's ability to see everything in the past will likely have an impact on the overall story. We already know he is going to tell Jon he's a Targaryen. What other things might Bran possibly learn from the past? I'm sure there is more important information to be learned that might change the course of the story. We're just gonna have to wait and see what Bran learns next. If I had to guess, he's due for some visions coming up in the next episodes. Lastly, the episode ends with Daenerys' troops taking a lightly guarded Casterly Rock while the rest of Cersei's troops march to take Highgarden. Now, Cersei's main motive for going after Highgarden was likely to recover the gold to pay for the crown's debts to the Iron Bank, but we also have her grudge against Lady Olenna that played a role in her decision. As Jaime heads up the castle to meet Lady Olenna, we see the rest of Highgarden being sacked. Now, there were a couple serious lines from this scene, some of which had the most important implications from this episode. First, Lady Olenna talks about Cersei with Jaime and tells him that Cersei is a disease and that she will likely be the end of him. And to top it off, he doesn't seem to disagree with her. She acknowledges that Jaime truly loves Cersei and that his love for her has gone far beyond his control. He also acknowledges that as well. Then, as she drinks her poison, she drops a major bomb on Jaime. She reveals that she was indeed the one who orchestrated the poisoning of King Joffrey, Jaime's son. Now, at face value, this might not seem too important to the viewers since it happened so long ago, and since we already had a hunch that it was Olenna from an earlier conversation between Baelish and her, but for the story this is actually extremely important. Most of Cersei's hatred for Tyrion is derived from her belief that he poisoned her son. Now that Jaime knows the truth, how will that affect his ability to potentially fight against his brother? As I mentioned in other videos, what if Cersei commands Jaime to kill Tyrion? How will he react now that he knows the truth about Joffrey? He's always had a soft spot for Tyrion. Will this dilemma cause Jaime to have a change of heart and abandon Cersei's cause? I'm assuming it will be something that is addressed in the next few episodes of this season, and it might have implications for the final season. We'll just have to wait and see as episode 4 for Game of Thrones airs this Sunday. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to like it and subscribe for more Game of Thrones videos as well as other related content. Take care.